About 10 years ago, I graduated college, was unable to find immediate work, and got pretty desperate around Christmas time. So I took on the iconic role of Santa Claus at my local mall. But since Christmas is probably my favorite holiday, I never had a problem getting into character. And well, thanks to my love of pizza and beer, I've never had a problem looking the part either. All it took was the addition of one of those glossy fake white beards and the iconic red suit itself, and I was making myself feel festive just by looking in the mirror. I had the voice down, the suit, the beard, and if I'm being honest, I was pretty proud of how good a Santa I was. Outside of the holiday season, I now work as an admin assistant for a shipping company. Not exactly the most exciting job in the world, but it pays all right. So when the annual opportunity to don the red suit and make some kids smile comes around, I jump at the chance. However, during my time on the job, the most valuable lesson I learned was that you can never, ever promise the kids anything. There will be some children that ask for unrealistic gifts for Christmas. Some are just impossible to procure, like, I want a dragon, a horse, a tank. But sometimes they'll ask for other things that are a little more sensible, just way out of their parents' holiday budget. So I'd learned to give them my best, Santa will try his very best for you, before moving the topic of conversation onto something else. Christmas last year was pretty rough though, mainly because I had made the decision to make it the final one I'd play Santa. But it was rough for other reasons too. I'd developed quite the working relationship with some of the mall employees, both short and long term, so it was quite emotional when I announced that I'd be hanging up the Santa hat to spend more time with my family around the holidays. Anyway, Friday, December 22nd, was my last shift before the switch over to the new guy playing Santa Claus, and the mall was way busier than expected. I mean, it always gets pretty hectic the closer you get to Christmas, but even I've never seen anything like it in all the years I've been playing the role. This final day of festivities was easily the toughest one to date, as I knew after that day I'd be moving on from playing Santa Claus. I know this seems kinda suspect. Most people feel liberated when they leave a job like that. But at the risk of sounding sort of sappy, I didn't have many good Christmases growing up, so I felt like a lot of the festive spirit was me making up for lost time. They say that time flies when you're having fun. Never was a truer word said. That last day flew by quicker than I could have ever expected. One minute it was lunchtime, the next the sun had set, and it was fast approaching the time when I'd have to wrap everything up. But just as I was beginning to leave, I noticed a little girl slowly approaching me. "Why, hello there, little one. And where are your parents?" I kept the voice on, giving her my warmest Santa smile. She didn't say a word. She just gave me this tired look and kept walking toward me with her arms held aloft, as if she wanted to be picked up. I looked around for her parents, but I didn't see anyone that was obviously accompanying her. So I picked the little girl up and plopped her down on my lap, just as I'd done 1,000 times before. "And what might your name be, young lady?" My name is Holly." "Holly? Well, I never. What an adorable festive name. The Holly and the Ivy is one of my favorite Christmas songs. And may I ask, what is your last name, Holly?" "Donachie. It's Donachie." I nodded to the nearby mall security to have the name Holly Donachie broadcast over the mall's speaker system. That way her parents would come and find her. No doubt they'd be extremely worried at this point. But all the while this was happening, I would keep her company. "And what is it that Santa can get you for Christmas, Holly?" Again, she didn't answer. She looked off into the distance as if she were staring at nothing, like the 1,000-yard stare you hear about NAM vets having. She then looked up at me with the saddest set of blue-green eyes I'd ever seen. "All I want for Christmas is a friend." I was dumbstruck. In all my years of playing Santa Claus, I'd never had any kids say they wanted a friend for Christmas. It was absolutely heart-wrenching. All I could think to do was pat her on the head. "Well, I can be your friend, Holly. Santa Claus will always be your friend, and I'm sure a little girl as lovely as you will have no trouble finding herself a friend." She gave me a weak smile, hugged me, and then hopped down off my lap. I tried to stop her from just running off, but I was hesitant to actually grab her by the arm, lest I upset her. I called her name a few times, but she didn't seem to listen. She just disappeared into the throngs of festive shoppers. I tried to follow, but there was no sign of her, so I started asking around if anyone had seen a little girl, about 4 feet tall, long brown hair, those almost luminous blue-green eyes, kind of a shabby appearance. Not a single person had any idea what I was talking about. It took a fair few minutes for members of the mall's security staff to actually wade through the sea of people and make it to the Santa's grotto. When I told them that she ran off into the department store, they started to become worried. "Have any parents showed up looking for her?" I asked. "Nah, no one. Maybe she just wandered here after getting out of the house or something. Parents don't even know to look here." I was getting increasingly anxious as time went on, but after a thorough search of the mall and some intense studying of the CCTV camera, there were no signs of little Holly. It was like she just dropped off the face of the earth. I suppose that should have been the last of it, but for some reason I couldn't keep this little girl off my mind. The way she acted when questioned about her parents, compared to how forthcoming she was with all the other stuff I'd asked her, left a really bad taste in my mouth. So, one morning after a dog walk and a little breakfast, I sat down on my computer and plugged the little girl's name into Google. I don't quite know what I was expecting to find. Nothing, if I'm being honest, but what I did find absolutely horrified me. December 23rd. Desperate mother pleads for return of missing girl. 9-year-old Holly Grace Donachie was reported missing by her mother, Lily Rose Donachie. At the time of her disappearance, the little girl was wearing a blue and white dress, white tights, and said her hair was in bunches. She is approximately 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighing at 60 pounds, and has brown hair and blue-green eyes. If you have any information regarding the whereabouts of any missing person, please contact the Suffolk County Police Department at 617-635-1100. I was stunned. I just saw her a few weeks before on the 22nd. Perhaps it was a typo, but the more I researched, the more uneasy I became. The next article sent shivers down my spine. January 4th. Breaking. The remains of the missing 9-year-old girl, Holly Donachie, were found today, January 4th, in a wooded area about 3 miles away from her home. Suffolk County Police are investigating the cause of death, which appears to be an act of foul play. Holly was gone. She died just a few weeks after I met her, and all she ever wanted was a friend. Back when it was originally released, I really wanted to get my hands on a new Xbox One X. You know the one. It was 4K ready with a considerably faster processor. So naturally, I tried absolutely everything in my power to get one as immediately as I could. My local Walmart was having one of those Black Friday sales, and like so many others, I stood patiently in line, waiting to try and beat the rush to grab one. But I was nowhere near sprightly or fortunate enough to actually get one that way. So after failing to get one in person, I then tried getting one online. But as rapidly as I wanted one to own, the users who were reselling them were asking way too much money, and I simply couldn't afford to shell out double, or sometimes triple the price. After weeks of trying to find a way to get a hold of one, I had to come to the conclusion that it just wasn't to be. It was then that I had something of a stroke of luck. Although I had resorted to Craigslist in my desperation, I did actually find someone that was selling their Xbox One X at no more than the original buying price of the console. Naturally, I was skeptical. For the life of me, I simply couldn't fathom why they would do something like that, but one thought overrode all others. If I didn't put in a bid now, someone else would, and I could kiss my chance of owning a One X goodbye. I immediately emailed the seller and let them know that I was very interested. Not only that, but I had the cash on hand and was ready to go. I also offered to pay for gas or whatever it would take to get the console delivered to my door. I figured that would be a pretty appealing offer to someone who I guessed was just strapped for cash around the holidays. I was stunned to get an almost instantaneous response, stating that they did still have the Xbox and were in fact still waiting for a proper bid from a serious buyer. They politely asked for a delivery address so they could bring it over as soon as possible. I was sort of hesitant to divulge such personal information and asked if it would be a better idea to first meet in public since it was much safer that way. I'll be honest, I wasn't too pleased with the idea of a total stranger coming over to my house, but he informed me that he was going to be very busy running holiday errands all day and that there would only be some pretty specific windows of opportunity to drop it off. It would be much more convenient for him if he was about to come over to my house. I was still not particularly ecstatic about the idea, but oh man, I really wanted that new 4K Xbox. So in the end, I agreed and texted the dude my home address. I figured it was safer than me going over to his place. At least this way I'd be on home turf. I was so happy and eager to get my hands on that new console, and that excitement only grew as I began waiting for the guy to turn up. But he took his sweet time. I mean, hours and hours passed by before I began to suspect that he wasn't going to actually show. Around 1 in the afternoon, 4 hours after he was due, I was seriously losing my cool, thinking it was a prank or something. I tried texting the guy back, asking him where he was. Previously, I had gotten pretty timely responses from the guy, but this time I didn't hear a single thing from him. By 6 that evening, I just lost all hope. I assumed that he got a better offer from someone else and didn't have the heart to tell me he picked a new buyer. I was disappointed, more than words can possibly describe. I got myself so psyched, and I can't even tell you how deflated I was. It's one thing not to have gotten the item from the store. I could come to terms with that. But I was so close to having one in my hands, it sucked having my hopes dashed so cruelly like that. And that didn't mean I'd given up entirely. So for the rest of the night, I kept looking around on Craigslist and other sites to find a new Xbox One X that was within my price range. But as I was getting ready to wind down for bed, I heard something. At first I had dismissed it as the wind or something, that it was maybe just my imagination. But then I heard it again. Someone knocking. Not at my front door, but lightly on the TV room window. I walked up to the bedroom window and peer out into the driveway, seeing this strange-looking dude at my front door looking around as if checking the coast is clear. I'm suspicious, but I go downstairs to see what he wants. He identified himself as the guy who had the Xbox, apologized for being so late, and explained he had gotten backtracked with errands during his day. Then he casually asked if I still had the money. I opened the door all the way, but still kept the screen door closed as a precaution. Something just didn't feel right, like at all. I told him that, yeah, I still had the cash on me, but I didn't see that he had anything with him, so I calmly asked if he had brought the Xbox with him, like if it's still in his car or anything. As expected, he told me it was out in his van. He told me to get the money and come out to the van with him and he would get it for me. I let him know that I wasn't really comfortable walking out to his van, but he seems to understand and tells me it was all good. I briefly look over the guy's shoulder and see that there is in fact someone else sitting there in the van. Not only that, but the dude at my door has been keeping his hands concealed in the little front pouch of his hoodie the whole time while talking to me, and there was definitely something more than just his hands in there. Don't ask me how I could tell. I just could. You know when you just get a gut feeling about something? Yeah, that. I tried to stay as chill as possible as I lied to him that I'd just go fetch my wallet and return in a minute. His mood immediately changed as I closed the door in his face before locking it. I then make the split-second decision, better to be safe than sorry, so I pull my phone out of my shorts and dial 911. But as I do, I heard a loud thud on my front door, then the sound of the van's engine revving before it zooms off into the night. When I went to check and see if he had damaged my door, I nearly peed my pants when I saw a rusty old hatchet buried in the wood. I was right that he had something in his sweatshirt, and that I shouldn't go out to the van with him. Be careful who you're buying from, folks. You never know who's behind the username. I worked in a toy shop for a couple of years, and as you can imagine, Christmas was a pretty intense time for all of us who work the holiday shifts. It was impossible to get that job without being an intensely enthusiastic, happy, smiley kind of person. Like 80% of the staff were entertainers or had come from some kind of performance background, and we were living the dream, so to speak. We were actually getting paid to play with toys, joke with kids, and above all, Christmas was the best time of the year for that. A toy shop at Christmas time has such a magical feeling about it, especially if all the staff have the Christmas spirit about them. Now, our store was hugely into Christmas, to the point where our smart casual uniforms even had assistants to Santa Claus or Santa's Little Helpers or other various things written in big writing over the back. This, of course, led to some fantastic interactions with kids, asking about if we'd met him and things like that. Being the only staff member who had actually worked with children for years, these questions were normally sent my way to be answered because I always had one ready. So, that's the backstory out of the way. One weekday, at an oddly quiet moment, I was on my own on the shop floor while the other staff members restocked after the afternoon rush. A boy comes in unaccompanied, must have been about 9 or 10, smiles briefly at me, and starts walking around. I gave him a couple of minutes to take a look at things before asking him if he wants to play with the new air-powered rocket launcher we had. "No thanks. I know Santa. I don't need your help," he replies flatly. This was mildly unusual, but hey, he was a pretty sweet kid otherwise. Unfortunately, I don't know much in there that would have been good for a kid his age. I figured it'll probably be his dad or someone paying for it, so I start showing him some of the limited stuff that would be suitable for some of the older kids. I show him a few things, and he sees something he likes, this big massage slipper. It's one big slipper that you put both feet into, and it has various massage settings. Not the kind of thing I'd imagine him to pick out, but a fairly cool gift nonetheless. So he asks how much it is, and I tell him it's like $20 or whatever the price was. He then instantly looks angry and frustrated. "Is that a bit too expensive, bud?" I ask, keeping the tone friendly. I don't want this kid to be upset, and he nods. So I show him some other things, and he starts getting more and more difficult to deal with. He's frowning, breathing all heavy through his nose like he's building up to some kind of temper tantrum. He starts telling me again how he knows Santa, how Santa gives toys away to good kids and doesn't ask for money in return. I just calmly explain that I can't just give stuff away for free, then politely leave him to it to browse the rest of the toys. A couple of more minutes go by. I'm just sitting by the cash register reading a book since the store is so quiet. It's only me and the kid with my manager up in the office. I remember looking up from my book, and the kid is at the register, just staring up at me with this angry look on his face. Once again, I apologize and explain to the kid that, as much as I'd like to, I can't just give stock away, otherwise I'll get fired. "Your boss is mean," the kid says, seething with anger at this point. Now, this probably wasn't the best thing to do, but since the kid was so on the money with this little statement, my boss was indeed a jerk, I just laugh. Like, not hysterically, just like this little involuntary giggle. The kid does not take this well. He thinks I'm laughing at him. "Why are you laughing at me?" he asks, practically shaking with rage. I begin to explain that I'm not actually laughing at him, but I soon realize it's not getting through to him. He just storms out of the store, disappearing among the crowds of middle-aged women that are clogging up the mall. As the afternoon draws on, the store gets a little busier and I get to actually do some work. Like I said, the work was fun, so it was never a problem. Being busy meant the hours go quicker, which means I get to go home quicker. Win-win. So I make a few sales, get to test out some of the fancy new Nerf guns we had in the store, and the weird kid eventually just slips from my mind. Nothing remotely eventful happens for the rest of the day. Right up until closing time when I'm starting my stock take and working on closing down the store. Someone is standing at the register. I look up from my worksheet and it's the kid. I give him a cheery enough greeting, hoping the kid's mood is improved, but it hasn't. Instead, it's gotten worse. "You're mean too," he hisses. "Look, I'm sorry, kid, but where are your parents?" I ask, but the kid refuses to answer. He just glares at me again. "Kid, where are your parents? I don't want to have to call mall security, but you can't be wandering around on your own, okay?" "He knows when you are sleeping," the kid mutters. I roll my eyes, but the way he says it has me really creeped out. "He knows when you're awake. He knows when you've been bad or good, and you've been really, really bad." Where's your pop, kid?" I ask again, trying to remain calm. "North Pole." "Yeah, very funny, but seriously, you gotta go. The store is closing." "He's gonna climb down your chimney, covered in soot, all while you're asleep," the kid said. I didn't say a word in reply. "He'll know when you're asleep, and he'll be able to creep up right next to your bed." I reach for the store's phone, dialing the mall security short number. I try not to listen to the kid, but I can't help but hear his words over the phone's dial tone. "He's gonna stuff your mouth with coal until you choke and die." I turn, ready to scream at this creepy little brat. It's one thing to be a spoiled kid. It's another to say such threatening things to someone who's only trying to help. But when I turn around, the kid was gone. Not a sign of him, even outside the store in the emptying mall. I've only told this story a handful of times, but it never fails to creep me out. The idea of such a kid having such a skewed idea of Santa as some weird, avenging angel, having a warped view of the holiday season, never, ever fails to make my skin crawl. Bruce Jeffrey Pardo. A name you may have never heard of before, but in 10 minutes or so, it'll be a name you'll never, ever forget. Bruce Pardo spent his formative years in the San Fernando Valley, graduating from John H. Francis Polytechnic High School in Sun Valley, Los Angeles. After earning a degree from the California State University, Northridge, he was gainfully employed at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in La Canada, Flint Ridge for many years. It was working at the Flint Ridge lab in 2004 that he has a chance encounter with one Sylvia Orzo, the woman who would become his wife in early 2006. However, the marriage was far from a blissful one. In less than a year into the betrothal, Sylvia filed for a divorce. She cited that Mr. Pardo refused to open a joint bank account with her, that he also expected Sylvia to take care of her own 3 children with her own finances. One can understand why Miss Orzo would be so quick to seek a separation. Despite the official reasons given in Orzo's application for the divorce, it seems that there were other things at work that motivated her to file for one. This includes the rumor that Pardo had abandoned his previous family after their child was crippled in a hideous swimming accident, refusing to pony up the money for hospital and rehab fees. In June of 2008, a divorce court had ordered Bruce Pardo to pay almost $2,000 a month in spousal support. During the divorce proceeding, Bruce had angrily confided to a close friend his wife was taking him to the cleaners. Then just a month later in July, disaster struck when Pardo was fired from his job as an electrical engineer at ITT Electronic Systems for billing false hours. As a result, the court suspended the support payments due to job hardship. But according to court documents, Pardo was still required to pay Sylvia Orzo a lump sum of $10,000 as part of the divorce settlement. Sylvia Orzo had already kept the diamond-studded wedding ring, as well as the family dog, and in a court declaration, Pardo complained that Sylvia was living with her parents, not paying rent, and had spent lavishly on a luxury car, gambling trips to Las Vegas, meals at fine restaurants, massages, and other luxuries. All of this left Pardo with an intense desire for revenge, and on Christmas Eve of 2008, he made a terrifying, fateful decision. At approximately 11:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo was dressed in a Santa Claus suit when he knocked on the door of his former in-laws' house, occupied by about 25 people. A Christmas Eve party was in full swing, spirits were high. Although the revelers were not expecting to see Pardo at the party, they were pleased to see him nonetheless. His 8-year-old niece, Katrina Yusupolsky, the daughter of Letitia Yusupolsky, a sister of Sylvia Pardo, ran to greet him, obviously overjoyed to see her uncle wearing such festive garb. As she bounded towards him, arms either side of her as she prepared to give Santa a big hug, Pardo pulled out a handgun and shot her in the face. The horror that the party experienced in that moment is hard to fathom. As Pardo began firing indiscriminately at the fleeing revelers, those that had been cut down find Pardo looming over them, pistol in hand, before he brutally executes them with shots to their heads. In the initial aftermath of the attack, one of the house was clear of all but the dead and dying. Pardo took a package from his parked car. Inside it was something he'd been working on for months, a homemade flamethrower. An accomplished engineer, what Pardo has created was an effective weapon indeed, and he used it to spray burning gasoline all over the building. 9 people died from either gunfire or flames, and 3 others were wounded. The 8-year-old niece, who was shot in the face with severe but non-life-threatening injuries, a 16-year-old girl shot and wounded in the back, and a 20-year-old woman who suffered a broken ankle jumping out of the second-floor window. There was one survivor who called the authorities during the attack after escaping to a neighbor's house. The resulting fire soared approximately 40 to 50 feet and took almost 100 firefighters almost 2 hours to extinguish. Due to the intensity of the fire, identification of the victims was only possible with dental and medical records. After the attack, Pardo swapped the Santa outfit for his regular clothes and drove his Dodge Caliber rental car to his brother's house in Sylmar, about 30 miles away from the crime scene. It was here that he was later found dead from a single, self-inflicted gunshot wound. It was initially believed that Pardo intended to flee to Canada by plane since he had bought an airline ticket to a flight on Air Canada. However, it was subsequently discovered that the flight itinerary on Northwest Airlines was from Los Angeles to Moline, Illinois, with a layover in Minnesota. Pardo had called days before to tell a high school friend that he was planning to visit, but investigators were unsure if he was actually intending to visit or if the flight was simply to throw investigators off the scent. However, he had visited the friend before in October of 2008, so it is likely he was going to attempt to lay low in Illinois before he escaped over the border. Other reports stated that the Santa suit had melted during the flamethrower portion of the attack and had adhered to his skin, so not all of it could be removed. Given that he was suffering from severe third-degree burns on his arms stemming from the blaze, Pardo decided to go against the initial plan. Police found $17,000 in cash cling-wrapped on his legs inside a girdle. His rental car, parked 1 block from his brother's house, had been rigged with remnants of his Santa suit that would detonate the car with black powder if removed. Also recovered from the scene were 4 13-round capacity handguns that were empty, and at least 200 rounds of ammunition, suggesting that what had been inside the car was being treated as a threat. A bomb squad fired an incendiary device inside it, burning and destroying it. At Pardo's house in Montrose, police had recovered 5 empty boxes for semi-automatic handguns, a Benelli M2 tactical shotgun, and a container for high-octane fuel tank gasoline. They also found what was described as a virtual bomb factory in his home. Pardo's act of insane vengeance left a lasting legacy. Polystyrene, the lead singer of the 70s post-punk band X-Ray Specs, recorded a song in 2010 called Black Christmas, which contains references to the massacre. All alone drowning in my sorrows, Christmas time always brings my sadness home. A child is born on Christmas Day, but they crucified him away. It stands to reason that there is no good day to find a dead body, but perhaps the very worst time to find one is on Christmas Day. A celebration of life and love stands in stark contrast to the brutal realities of life and death, but sometimes real life is much stranger and much more disturbing than fiction. This is the story of Joanne Yeats. Joanna Claire Yeats was born on the 19th of April 1985 to David and Teresa Yeats in Hampshire, England. She was privately educated and studied for her A-levels at Peter Symonds College, graduating with a degree in landscape architecture. She later received her postgraduate diploma in landscape architecture from the University of Gloucestershire, the golden ticket to her dream of a career in horticulture. In December 2008, Yeats met 25-year-old architect Greg Reardon, and the pair quickly began dating. The couple moved in together the following year, opting to settle in a nearby Bristol when the company that they were employed by relocated there. By October of 2010, Yeats and Reardon had moved into a flat at 44 Canny Road in the city's Clifton suburb, happily cohabiting with a view to starting a family. However, at approximately 8 p.m. on the 19th of December 2010, Reardon returned home from a weekend visit to Sheffield to find their new apartment completely deserted. Reardon tried to contact her by phone, but had no success. Shortly after, Reardon called her again, but her mobile phone rang from a pocket of her coat, which was still in the flat. He also found that her purse and keys had also been left, and that their cat appeared to have been neglected. Greg began to worry at this point. Joanna doted on that cat. It was extremely out of character for her to fail to care for it. Shortly after midnight, Reardon contacted the police and Yeats' parents to report her missing. A police investigation came to the conclusion that Yeats had attended a staff Christmas party with colleagues on December 17th at the Bristol Ram pub on Park Street, leaving at around 8 in the evening to begin the short walk home. Yeats was seen on CCTV at around 8:10 p.m. leaving a Waitrose supermarket without purchasing anything. Phone records showed that she called a friend, Rebecca Scott, at 8:30 p.m. to arrange a meeting on Christmas Eve. The last known footage of Yeats recorded her buying a pizza from a branch of Tesco Express at around 8:40 p.m. She had also bought 2 small bottles of cider at a nearby off-license bargain booze. On the 21st of December, Greg Reardon, along with Joanne's parents, made a public appeal for her safe return at a police press conference. In another press conference, broadcast live on the BBC, Yeats' father David commented on her disappearance. "I think she was abducted after getting home to her flat. I have no idea of the circumstances of the abduction because of what was left behind. I feel sure she would not have gone out by herself, leaving all these things behind, and she was taken away somewhere." Detectives retrieved a receipt for a pizza but found no sign of it or of its packaging. Both bottles of cider were found, with one of them partially consumed. As there was no evidence of forced entry or a struggle, investigators began to examine the possibility that Yeats may have known her abductor. On Christmas Day of 2010, a fully clothed body was found in the snow by a couple walking their dogs along Longwood Lane near a golf course and next to the entrance of a quarry in Fayland, approximately 3 miles from Joanne and Greg's flat. To the absolute heartbreak of her friends and family, the body was identified by police as that of Joanne's. Reardon and the Yeats family visited the site of the discovery on the 27th of December. David Yates said that the family had been told to prepare for the worst and express relief that her daughter's body had been recovered. Shortly after 7 a.m. on the 30th of December, Christopher Jeffries, Yates' landlord who lived in the same building, was arrested on suspicion of her murder. But on the 4th of March 2011, after a thorough investigation, police stated he was no longer a suspect. He subsequently won an undisclosed sum in libel damages for defamatory news articles published following his arrest, and received an apology from Avon and Somerset police for any distress caused to him during the investigation. In January of 2011, a reconstruction of the case was filmed on location in Bristol for a broadcast of the BBC television program Crime Watch. Snow Business, a Gloucestershire-based firm that has been involved in the production of the Harry Potter films, was contracted to reproduce the snowy conditions at the time of Yeats' disappearance. Within 24 hours of news coverage about the production, over 300 people contacted the police. A breakthrough led investigators to believe that Yeats' body might have been transported in a large hold-all or suitcase. On the morning of the 20th of January, Avon and Somerset police arrested 32-year-old engineer Vincent Tabak, who lived with his girlfriend in the flat next door to Yeats. But authorities declined to reveal additional details while the suspect was being interrogated due to concerns over controversial media coverage of Jeffrey's arrest. The Tabak arrest followed an anonymous tip from a female caller, shortly after a televised appeal by Yeats' parents on Crime Watch. Canninge Road was closed by police while scaffolding was constructed around Yeats' home, and officers sealed off Tabak's adjacent flat. Investigators also searched the nearby townhouse of a friend where Tabak was believed to have been staying about a mile away. Tabak had previously been ruled out as a suspect during an earlier stage of the investigation and had returned to Britain from a holiday visit to his family in the Netherlands. The trial of Vincent Tabak started on October 4, 2011 at Bristol Crown Court, where he pleaded guilty to manslaughter but denied murder. The prosecution's case was that Tabak had strangled Yeats at her flat within minutes of her arrival home, using sufficient force to kill her. The prosecutor stated that Tabak, who was around a foot taller than Yeats, had used his height and build to overpower her, pinning her to the floor by the wrists, and that she had suffered more than 40 separate injuries to her head, neck, torso, and arms during the struggle. These injuries included cuts, bruises, and a fractured nose. The court heard that the struggle was lengthy, and her death would have been slow and painful. However, no explanation was offered for the reasoning behind Tabak's initial attack on Yeats. Evidence was presented that Tabak had then tried to conceal the crime by disposing of her body. The court heard that DNA swabs taken from Yeats' body had provided a match with Tabak. Samples found behind the knees of her jeans indicated she may have been held by the legs as she was carried, while fibers suggested contact with Tabak's coat and car. Bloodstains were found on a wall overlooking a quarry close to where Yeats was discovered. The prosecution also said that Tabak attempted to implicate the landlord, Chris Jeffries, for the murder during the police investigation, and that in the days following Yeats' death, he had made internet searches for topics that included the length of time a body takes to decompose and the dates of refuse collections in the Clifton area. In his defense, he had told the court that he had killed Yeats while trying to silence her after she screamed when he tried to kiss her. He claimed that Yeats had made a flirty comment and invited him to drink with her. He said that after she screamed, he held his hands over her mouth and around her neck to silence her, but he denied suggestions of a struggle, claiming to have held Yeats by the neck with only minimal force and for about 20 seconds. He told the court that after dumping the body, he was in a state of panic. The jury was sent out to deliberate on the 26th of October and returned with a verdict 2 days later. On the 28th of October 2011, Tabak was found guilty of Joanna Yeats' murder by a 10-2 majority verdict. He was jailed for life with a minimum term of 20 years. Passing sentence, Mr. Justice Field referred to a carnal element to the killing. Jean-Benet Ramsey was born in 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia, the younger of two children of Patsy and John Ramsey. John Ramsey was a successful businessman who was the president of Access Graphics, a computer system company that would later be bought up and absorbed by the titanic Lockheed Martin. So in 1991, John and Patsy moved their family to Boulder, Colorado, where Access Graphics' new headquarters was to be located. Patsy Ramsey was a regular on the junior pageant scene and entered their daughter in various child beauty pageants that were held in Boulder. Jean-Benet would prove popular on the pageant scene, winning the titles of America's Royal Miss, Little Miss Charlevoix, Little Miss Colorado, Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, and National Tiny Miss Beauty. Jean-Benet's active role in child beauty pageants and Patsy's reported pageant mother behavior were common knowledge among their friends, family, and fellow contestants. According to the statement that Patsy gave to authorities on December 26, 1996, she realized that her daughter was missing after she found a 2-page handwritten ransom note on the kitchen staircase. The hastily scrawled note, written in black marker pen, demanded $118,000 for their child's safe return. John pointed out to police that the amount was nearly identical to his Christmas bonus of the prior year, which suggested that someone who would have access to that information would be involved in the crime. Investigators looked at several theories behind the dollar amount demanded and seriously considered employees at Access Graphics who may have known of the amount of John's prior bonus as suspects. By most standards, the ransom note was unusually long. The FBI told the police that it was very unusual for such a note to be actually written at the crime scene during the crime itself. This led police to believe that the note was staged, due to it not having any fingerprints except for Patsy's and authorities who had handled it, and because it included an unusual use of exclamation marks and initialisms. The note and a practice draft were written with a pen and pad of paper from the Ramsey home. According to a Colorado Bureau of Investigation report, there were indicators that the author of the ransom note was Patricia Ramsey herself. However, a federal court ruled it highly unlikely that Patsy wrote the note, citing 6 certified handwriting experts. Meanwhile, John Ramsey made arrangements to pay the ransom as a forensics team was dispatched to the house. The team initially believed that the child had been kidnapped, and Jean-Benet's bedroom was the only room in that house that was cordoned off to prevent contamination of evidence. Boulder Police Detective Linda Arndt arrived early the next morning with the goal of awaiting the kidnapper's instructions, but there was never an attempt by anyone to claim the money. It was then that detectives made a horrifying discovery. One of the plain-clothes detectives asked John Ramsey and Fleet White, a family friend, to search the house to see if anything seemed suspicious. They started their search in the basement. John opened the latch door and was horrified to find his daughter's body in one of the rooms. Jean-Benet's mouth was gagged with duct tape. A nylon cord had bound her wrists and neck, while her torso was covered by a white blanket in an attempt to conceal the corpse, but it could not mask the smell. John Ramsey picked up the child's body and took it upstairs. The autopsy revealed that Jean-Benet had been killed on Christmas Day by strangulation and skull fracture. There was no evidence of conventional carnal abuse of any kind, although police refused to rule it out for the murder. Although no bodily fluid was found, there was evidence that there had been an injury to the girl's private parts. At the time of the autopsy, the pathologist recorded that it appeared her private area had been wiped with a cloth. A garrote that was made from nylon cord had been tied around Jean-Benet's neck and had apparently used to strangle her. The autopsy revealed a vegetable or fruit material which may represent pineapple, which Jean-Benet had eaten a few hours before her death. Photographs of the home taken on the day when Jean-Benet's body was found show a bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table with a spoon in it. However, neither John nor Patsy said they remembered putting the bowl on the table or feeding pineapple to Jean-Benet. If this was true, then Jean-Benet had been fed by whatever stranger had murdered her, a highly disturbing detail indeed. Boulder police initially focused almost exclusively upon John and Patsy as suspects in their daughter's killing, but by October of 1997, police had over 1,000 people in their index of person of interest for the case. However, a grand jury was convened on September 15, 1998, the main being to consider indicting the Ramseys for charges related to the case. In 1999, the grand jury returned a true bill to charge the Ramseys with placing the child at risk in a way that led to her death and with obstructing an investigation of murder based on the probable cause standard applied in such grand jury proceedings. But Boulder County District Attorney Alex Hunter did not prosecute them because he did not believe that he could meet the higher standard of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt that is required for a criminal conviction in the state of Colorado. However, many years later in 2015, Boulder Police Chief Mark Beckner disagreed with completely exonerating the Ramseys, stating, "Exonerating anyone based on a small piece of evidence that has not yet been proved to even be connected to the crime is absurd." He also stated that the unknown DNA from JonBenét's clothing has got to be the focus of the investigation. At this point in time and that, until one can prove otherwise, the suspect is the donator of that unknown DNA. In 2016, Gordon Combs, a former investigator for the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, also questioned total absolution of the Ramseys, stating, "We all shed DNA all the time with our skin cells. It can be deposited anywhere at any time for various reasons that are benign. To clear somebody just on the premise of touch DNA, especially when you have a situation where the crime scene wasn't secure at the beginning, it really is a stretch." Stephen E. Pitt, a forensic psychiatrist hired by Boulder authorities, said, "The public exoneration of the Ramseys was a big slap in the face to Chief Beckner and the core group of detectives who had been working on the case for years." However, it seems the twists and turns in the case never stopped. John Mark Carr, a 41-year-old elementary school teacher, was arrested in Bangkok, Thailand on August 15, 2016, when he falsely confessed to murdering JonBenet. He claimed that he had drugged, assaulted, and accidentally killed her. Yet authorities also said they did not find any evidence linking Carr to the crime. In confession, Carr had provided only basic facts that were publicly known and failed to provide any convincing details. His claim that he had drugged JonBenet was doubted because the autopsy indicated that no drugs were found in her body. What's more, DNA samples that were taken from Carr did not match DNA found on JonBenet's body. We may never know who actually murdered JonBenet Ramsey, but one thing is certain. What should have been a jolly family holiday was turned into a living nightmare by a killer who may never face justice for their crimes. This time of year, nothing pairs better with too much food and alcohol than grim, macabre tales of murder and mayhem. This particular ghastly tale takes place on Christmas Day 1929 on a farm outside Germantown, North Carolina. Charlie Lawson's big Christmas surprise for his adoring family of 9 began with a trip into town. Sparing no expense, Charlie Lawson agreed to buy each and every member of his family an outfit of their choice before taking them over to a local photographer and having a family portrait taken. Quite a costly affair for a modest tobacco farmer. Just over a week later, it would be Christmas Day 1929. One might get the impression that Charlie was a good father who tried to bring his family the best Christmas possible, even on his meager income. But you'd be wrong. On the day itself, 17-year-old Marie Lawson had been busy in the kitchen preparing a fruitcake for after dinner that evening, while the younger sisters, 12-year-old Carrie and the 7-year-old Maybelle, wandered over to their aunt and uncle's house to celebrate the holidays and relieve some of the pressure on Charlie and his wife. Fanny Lawson, Charlie's spouse of 17 years, had been tending to her and Charlie's younger children, while Charlie and his oldest son, 16-year-old Arthur, nicknamed Buck, had planned a very special Christmas Day hunting trip, something of a yearly tradition for the pair. As Charlie and Arthur prepared to set out on their holiday hunting trip, they soon realized that they needed more shotgun shells if they were to have a successful hunt. Charlie sent Arthur up to the store to pick up some more ammo while he waited patiently in the tobacco barn. But when Charlie saw Carrie and Maybelle walking down the path on their way back from their aunt and uncle's home, he shouldered his shotgun, aimed in the direction of his 2 young children, and pulled the trigger. There was simply no telling of the absolute terror and confusion experienced by those poor girls. The instant hit of agony as clusters of buckshot slammed into their bodies. The pure sense of chaos, seeing their own father walk slowly over to their bodies, expecting him to help as any good father should, only to have him smash the butt of his shotgun over and over again into their skulls, cracking them open in the driveway of their own home. Charlie then set off towards the family home, his trusty shotgun firmly in his grip. Fanny, who had been out on the front porch to investigate the gunfire, attempted to flee, but it was no good. There's no outrunning a shotgun blast. Hearing the gunshots from outside, the teenage Marie screamed bloody murder, trapped in a state of abject panic as her father racked the shotgun and gunned her down in the kitchen. The youngest children heard the commotion and, fearing for their lives, attempted to hide. Charlie quickly found them and brutally bludgeoned them to death with the butt of his shotgun. Even the newborn Mary Lou was shown no quarter. Charlie killed her without hesitation, leaving a horrific mess in the child's crib. Then, for some unknown reason, he then placed rocks under the heads of his dead wife and children and wandered off into the woods as if in a daze. Concerned neighbors of the Lawsons, initially walking over to wish them a Merry Christmas, heard the gunshots and hurried to check on them. Instead of the festive merriment they had come to expect, they stumbled onto a grisly tableau of blood, buckshot, and shattered bone. Before they could set out to find Charlie, they heard a single gunshot in the woods. Charlie had shot himself. By the time Arthur made it back from his trip into town, his entire family had been murdered. Folks at the town's general store had gotten word that something awful had happened, and someone in town offered to give Arthur a ride back to the family farm. When he reached his home, the police had already arrived and a crowd began to gather. In the woods, police found footprints indicating that Charlie had been pacing around a tree for some time before taking his own life. Next to his body were letters to both his parents. Some accounts reported that Charlie had placed stones over the eyes of his dead family members, as well as cushioning their heads with them. To this very day, no one is certain what exactly drove Charlie Lawson to slaughter his entire family, with the exception of young Arthur, before taking his own life. Some speculate that Lawson had been abusing Marie, and that she may well have been pregnant with an inbred child at the time of her death. Others have insisted that Charlie could not have had the capacity to commit the heinous acts that occurred on the family farm that Christmas Day, and that the entire thing had been staged to frame Charlie. A more credible explanation is that Charlie had developed a medical condition that affected his actions and caused him to experience a psychotic break. Perhaps he'd knocked a screw loose after suffering a head injury while digging a ditch on the farm, or as some reported, he had some kind of painful growth on his chest that had him in constant agony, and he decided to end it all and take his family with him. The killing attracted so much attention that an estimated 5,000 curiosity seekers attended the Lawson family funeral. They were all buried in a single large plot in the private Browder family cemetery just outside of Germantown. The house became a macabre tourist attraction after the murder-suicide, and Charlie's brother decided to open the house to the public, charging admission for tours of the property. Still on the counter sat the cake that Marie had been making. Even after the house had been closed, the cake made its rounds in traveling dime museums. Protective plastic had been used to cover the cake after several onlookers swiped some raisins. The cake toured for at least a decade before surviving family members buried the cake, along with the awful memories that came with it. Though the home was later demolished, the area still has enough spooky history to have inspired ghost sightings of the doomed Lawson children and of murderous Charlie Lawson. Unbelievably, the tragedy of the Lawson family didn't end in 1929. In 1945, James Arthur Lawson, the only child to survive the Christmas Day bloodshed, died at the age of 31 in a truck accident in Walnut Cove, North Carolina, quite near Germantown. He was buried in the same cemetery as the rest of his family, leaving behind 4 children of his own. When news of Arthur's death reached the local community, rumors of a family curse abounded. They insisted that Charlie had reached out to claim his son from beyond the grave. The murders also inspired the famed bluegrass duo the Stanley Brothers to pen a suitably morbid tune recounting the lost in family's fate. The song includes the following lyrics. They say he killed his wife at first, while the little ones did cry. Please, Papa, won't you spare our lives? It is so hard to die. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let'sReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, in 1940 your body was worth about $6,000.